Good afternoon. Today is March 8th, 2022, and welcome to the Ways and Means Committee bill hearings. First up, we have House Bill 1172 that is sponsor only. Delegate Weigel, hello, and whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to be with you and the honorable members of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm pleased to present House Bill 1172. It is in the same format as House Bill 746 that was passed out of the committee in the 2021 legislative session. The bill stalled in Senate Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee last year. This year, the bill is cross-filed in the Senate with Senate Bill 989. All the bill does is simply removes the party affiliation from the ballot return envelope. My original intent was to block all the voter information on the exterior of the envelope. However, in my discussion with the election board, I was advised that much of that information is actually needed to process the ballot while retaining the confidentiality of the vote itself. It's a very simple bill, and I again ask that you render a favorable report on House Bill 1172.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Weigel? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1172.
Thank you very much.
House Bill 1209. Delegate Ampry, this is also sponsor only. Whenever you're ready, Delegate Ampry.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Glad to be here in front of my colleagues in the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, Delegate Marlon Ampry here speaking on behalf of House Bill 1209. And I have to first ask for an apology. The bill as drafted was an incorrect application of what we intended with the law. So we've sent over a recent edit of the bill. It is no longer a local bill. The purpose of the bill, I'll go through here shortly, but the purpose of the bill is to encourage more live performances here in Maryland and to encourage more people, in venues that struggle during COVID to have a full recovery. So House Bill 1209 is for the purpose of allowing a credit against the state income tax for an individual who performs a qualified live performance at an entertainment venue with a certain capacity and generally relating to qualified live performance tax credit. The goal of the bill is to incentivize artists and performers to come into Maryland, hopefully, of course, come down to Baltimore, which can have positive externalities within the city and state, revenues for neighborhood shops. So there's going to be a large impact there. Qualified live performance means a principal or headliner performance at an entertainment venue with a capacity to admit 2,000 individuals or fewer. Our goal here is not to ensure that Lamar Jackson gets a tax break or that Paul McCartney gets a big tax break when he comes to perform, but more so our small venues that were most harmed during COVID, where they weren't allowed to have performances for a long period of time. An individual may claim a credit against the state income tax in the amount of $5,000 for each qualified live performance during a taxable year, and will not exceed $25,000. The unused amount of the credit for any taxable year may not be carried over to any other taxable year. And the goal here, again, as previously stated, we know that during COVID, people lost their opportunity to perform. Many small, we think of, our big arenas, but many of our small establishments really took a deep hit by COVID. The other thing why this bill is important to me, thinking about when I was in high school and college, I feel as though whenever a performer came up and down the East Coast, they would go to DC and they would also come to Baltimore, or they'd also come to some other place in Maryland. But sometimes I'm noticing that many performers are Maryland's kind of becoming a flyover state for some of our performers. So I think this would be a great way to entice performers to come to Maryland. This would only be instituted for 2 years, so it'd be a sunset after 2 years. And I think after the 2 years sunset, not only would the tax credit be beneficial, but we hope that there's some relationships that form between the performers and the venues so that we can continue seeing them come through our doors here in Maryland. So that is the bill in a nutshell, House Bill 1209, and I ask for a favorable report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Ampry? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1209. Next, House Bill 1191, Delegate Novotny, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chairman Atterbury and members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Delegate Reed Novotny. I represent Western Howard County and Carroll County. So first, I'm going to start off with some bad news. You've probably seen this in the news lately, but inflation last month hit a 40-year high at 7.5%. Inflation numbers come out for the next month, this Thursday. Additionally, Maryland's gas tax is connected to CPI and inflation. And today, I am glad I am testifying because Maryland hit the highest on record gas averages, 150% higher than they were just 1 year ago. I'll say that again. 1 year ago, the prices have gone up since that time, 150%. The good news is Maryland can actually do something about it. Right now, we have record surpluses. And what I'm suggesting is we pause the inflationary part of our gas tax for the next 2 years. I've gotten calls from many people in many walks of life. Yesterday, I actually got a call from my neighbor who was a farmer, and he pleaded with me to say, is there anything we can do to stop the inflationary part of our gas tax? I think we can. Another one of my friends is actually a pilot in Southwest. He has told me that the increased gas taxes, as we're going up, the cost of airplane gas also goes up. That means they will at some point have to pass it down to the consumers. Even my daughter has noticed the prices that she sees when we go shopping on everyday goods. Simply put, this is a cost of living problem for all Marylanders as we see this inflationary gas tax go up. Not only that, it's an automatic gas tax. In 2013, this became law. It connected our gas tax in the state to an automatic increase, the CPI. So if it is not enacted, we will, at the state level, take almost $100 million more out of the pockets of Marylanders for the next 2 years. So I truly believe after COVID and the problems that we've been going through, we need to continue to give whatever we can to reduce the cost of living of all Marylanders throughout the state. I appreciate your time today, Madam Chair, and I ask for a favorable report.
Questions for Delegate Novotny? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Delegate Novotny. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1191. Calling House Bill 1119, there's one witness, Delegate Parrott. Whenever you're ready, Delegate Parrott. You're on mute.
Great. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, committee. It's great to be with you here today. And this bill that I have is really just a common sense bill that would allow us to, when we're putting out signs, be able to make sure that we know exactly where the signs need to go. So if you've been out the night before in elections, we're putting out signs and you really have no idea, if you're unfamiliar with the polling place, where the front door is, where actually people go in to vote. And this bill is something that the Board of Elections has already done in Washington County for the vast majority of their polling places. And that's where you can go in online. You can see an aerial shot of the polling place where they've marked where the front door is. And they've also hatched an area for the 100-foot radius around that front door, or in other jurisdictions like Montgomery County, sometimes it's 25 or 50, even 75 or 100 feet. Everyone else has 100 feet, but they'll show it on the aerial photograph with the hatched out area. So you know exactly where you can put your signs and where you can't put your signs on election day. So that's helpful for people who are electioneering, putting out signs, but it's also helpful for people who want to go vote, who might be new to the polling place. They oftentimes go to a high school. There are many different doors to go in, or even driveways to enter the school. But if they were able to go online to look and see this aerial photograph, and if the Board of Elections would just point them to that when they said, this is where you're going to vote and here's where you can go online to see it, this would be a huge help to people when they go to vote. It wouldn't be too expensive, but it would be a huge help, again, for electioneers to make sure they put their signs in the right spot so they're not taken up and thrown away, or they're actually at the wrong door. And I've seen that happen several different times, especially when you're looking at like gubernatorial races, larger races where they're trying to cover the whole state. And really that's the gist of the bill. So I'd like to stop there and open it up for questions. And you all also have a PowerPoint in your hands so that you can look and see that as well.
Delegate Wilkins has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate, for bringing this bill. I certainly understand how it could be useful. I just wanted to understand, are you focusing in on the electioneering boundaries or in terms of campaigns? Or are you focusing in on having the aerial photo so that voters can kind of understand what door to go into? And I ask because I know at least in Montgomery County, we can go online and get a photo of what the voting location looks like and where the entrance is and all of that, which is really helpful. I'm not sure if it's required or just something that is done voluntarily. So I just want to understand which direction you're trying to go into.
Yeah, my guess is that Montgomery County did that voluntarily, just like Washington County did theirs voluntarily. The only difference really between the two is that in Washington County, they've added that hatched area so you can see where you're not allowed to electioneer, where you're not allowed to put signs. So I think that'd be pretty easy to do in Montgomery County as well, since they already have it. There's the spot, just to 100-foot radius. It's pretty easy to make that change. So it's really for both. It's for electioneering, so people know where to put the signs, and also for voters, they know exactly which doors to go in.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Questions for Delegate Parrott? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Delegate Parrott. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1119.
Thank you.
House Bill 1125 is one witness. It's Delegate Adams' bill, but Betsy Hamilton from his office is here to present that bill. Welcome, Ms. Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Thanks for having me here today to present House Bill 1125 on behalf of Delegate Adams. This is the election law, push polls, requirements, and prohibitions bill. This bill, it prohibits a person from authorizing or conducting a push poll unless during the call, the caller discloses specified information. It also requires that persons conducting push polls have a designated agent in the state. This is a really good bill. We hope you all will support it, and we'd ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Are any questions for Ms. Hamilton? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
Thank
That
you.
concludes the testimony on House Bill 1125. House Bill 1283, Delegate Motz, and he is the one witness for this bill. And I see that he is on the screen, but not necessarily there. Delegate Motz.
I apologize, Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, welcome. Whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman and colleagues. It's great to be with you. For the record, I'm Johnny Mounts, State Delegate for District 37B, Talbot, Caroline, Dorchester, and Wacomico counties. This afternoon, I'm presenting House Bill 1283. House Bill 1283 would simply take the state voting requirements that include the state voting requirement of citizenship and apply that to municipal elections. Currently, I understand that there are multiple municipalities that do not require citizenship. However, our state law and our Constitution require citizenship. So there's a conflict there. I learned a lot about this. I want to thank the State Board of Elections for explaining to me how elections are worked. Some municipal elections are held by municipalities and the state Board of Election isn't involved in them at all. But these municipalities that are setting up their own election systems are in conflict with all the other elections that are taking place. So HB 1283 was put together to rectify that conflict, resolve it, and simply make the state voting requirement of citizenship, which is in our statute and our Constitution, supreme for all elections. And I urge the committee a favorable report. Thank you, Madam Chairman and colleagues.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Motz? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1283. Colleagues, I should also mention, I apologize, that our friends from the State Board of Elections are here in case you have questions for them as well. Jared Demarinis and Mary Wagner, thank you both for being here today. House Bill 1348, Delegate Cox. Delegate Cox does not appear to be with us. So we will just put those aside. And let's see if Delegate Shoemaker is here. Yes, Delegate Shoemaker, can you hear me? One moment.
I certainly can.
Okay, thank you. Let me find you on my screen here. I'm scrolling through. Are you able to present 963?
Certainly, Madam Chair, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Whenever you're ready, go ahead. House Bill 963.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a couple of years ago, particularly in the wake of the pandemic, Maryland has taken strides to facilitate the notion of mail-in voting. And we've done a lot of things to make that easier for folks to do. But what we haven't done is provide a mechanism in the law for verification of signatures. And a lot of states have, by the way. In fact, 27 states across the country conduct signature verification on returned absentee mail ballots. Now, I remember when I served on this great committee, I mean, that was one of the questions that I asked Linda Lamone. I said, what is the mechanism for verifying the signature on these mail-in ballots when they're returned to the local boards of election? And she indicated there really isn't one. So rather than reinvent the wheel, what I've done is I have had a bill drafted based upon the law that's on the books in California. So what you have before you, Madam Chair and members of this august committee, is a bill that's patterned after California law regarding signature verification, providing that local boards of election can verify signatures by looking at the signature on file.
Deja, who's my panel?
And if they so choose, they could ask the State Board of Election to provide them with software, and believe it or not, software exists to authenticate signatures these days, so that we can make sure that when ballots are received, they were in fact signed by the person ostensibly voting on the mail-in ballot. And that's pretty much all the bill does, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Shoemaker? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Delegate Shoemaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 963. Now calling House Bill 329, Delegate Moon, and there are 4 folks signed up after Delegate Moon who will have 2 minutes each. Delegate Moon, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 329 is a bill that attempts to streamline and make more efficient how we count ballots. Specifically, it does 3 things that I want to flag. 1, it allows for the pre-processing of mail-in ballots 8 days before early voting so that we don't have a logjam of these ballots to count. It pauses that process during early voting and then resumes thereafter. Second, it also gives voters who have missing oath signatures the opportunity to be notified and cure that omission within 10 days of the election. And it specifies a number of methods for them to do that by text, by email, or in person. Lastly, the bill also handles what happens when multiple ballots are cast, say, both a mail-in ballot and a provisional ballot. And it would say that the first ballot that is properly sworn is the ballot that would be counted. By way of background, 24 other states allow for this curing, and 38 other states do this pre-processing of the ballots. There is a substantially similar bill from the Senate, SB 163 from Senator Kagan. I do have an amendment to offer the committee, which would conform the House bill to what the Senate did, if you so choose to go in that direction. And the Senate added a couple items. One, it clarifies that you can't release the vote totals, even though you can pre-process some of the absentee counts. It also would create a process whereby State Board of Elections would create a framework for notifying people of the missing signatures within 3 days. And I believe the Senate also contained a provision to try and release some of these vote counts by precinct, including the early vote and the absentee. So that's it in a nutshell. I think it'll just make life a little bit easier as we do these new elections.
Thank you. Next, Rishi Shah for 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Rishi Shah. I'm an advocate with Marilyn Perg, here to testify in support of HB 329 to create a ballot curing process along with the sponsor amendments. I want to thank Delegate Moon for sponsoring this bill and just highlight that ballot curing and pre-processing is really critical. This process, when local boards of elections contact people who forget to sign in their mail-in ballot envelope and then allow these voters to come in and sign that envelope. In 2020, nearly 5,000 voters lost their voice in our democracy because they forgot to sign their mail-in envelope, and no one's voice in our democracy should be discounted because they forgot to sign a piece of paper. Ballot pre-processing is essential to making ballot curing happen because it's how boards of elections actually see whether or not ballot envelopes have been signed, so they can contact voters who didn't sign their mail-in ballots and reach out to them and get those signed. Like Delegate Moon mentioned, ballot pre-processing is also really great. After in 2020, we saw a spike in voting by mail because of COVID, and we expect to see more increases in mail-in voting as people voted by mail for the first time, and some of them really ended up liking that. So ballot pre-processing speeds up the timeline for which results can be certified, which increases confidence in the overall process. 20 states already have established a ballot curing process. Near 37, I believe, have already allowed for pre-processing of ballots. Maryland has always been a national leader on democracy issues, and it's time for us to take action on this issue. So I ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Janet Millison, please, for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, members of the committee, and Delegate Moon, who I see as a fellow graduate of Walt Whitman High School. For the record, my name is Janet Millison. I represent the League of Women Voters of Maryland, a nonpartisan organization that advocates for election operations that increase voter participation and are feasible to implement. I'm here to speak in support of House Bill 329. Now, before 2020, as you know, absentee ballots always accounted for a relatively small proportion of the vote. However, they're not going to revert to those previous low levels anytime soon because more people have come to appreciate the convenience, the absence of long lines, and the accessibility of voting by mail. The number of absentee ballot applications processed so far already exceeds the total number for 2018, and the primary is still months away. It's great to see such interest for a midterm election, and we hope that in-person turnout is equally strong. However, by law, our local boards of elections will be unable to start canvassing any of the expected flood of mail-in ballots until after Election Day. This requirement was suspended on an emergency basis in 2020, which enabled the boards to meet the election certification deadline. To avoid the risk of a missed deadline this year and in future elections, it's essential to allow local boards to begin processing mail-in ballots before Election Day. Early ballot processing will also give more time for voters to cure their ballot if they forget to sign the oath. Maryland's election administrators have always done a great job, even when faced with last-minute changes in emergency conditions. This bill will ensure they have the time they need to process all ballots speedily and accurately. The League of Women Voters urges a favorable report on House Bill 329. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Morgan Drayton for 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman and members of the committee. My name is Morgan Drayton, Policy and Engagement Manager with Common Cause Maryland, here to give testimony in favor of HB 329. As we've seen, the strain on our mail-in voting system has increased due to ongoing concern for public health and safety during the COVID-19 pandemic. And as we'll likely continue to see increases in vote by mail numbers as we move into another critical election year, we think it's more important than ever that we are taking necessary precautions and measures to support our state and local election boards in the secure administration of our elections. And as Delegate Moon and other advocates have done such a great job outlining the specifics of the bill, I'll try to keep my comments brief. We just want to ensure that we're giving local boards an adequate window of time to notify and give voters who need to cure their ballots an opportunity to correct those errors, so that we're ensuring that those who intend to vote do have their voice counted in this election. And just to ensure that local boards also have an adequate amount of time to pre-process all the ballots and ensure that our results are accurate and timely on election day. So we really think HB 329 just provides these common sense steps to improve our mail-in voting process. And for those reasons, we support the bill as well as the sponsor amendments, and we request a favorable report. Thank you.
Next, Alan Banov, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury and Vice Chair Washington. I'm Alan Banov. I'm a member of the Montgomery County Board of Elections, but I testify here as an individual in support of parts of HB 329 with the amendments which Delegate Moon will be offering to conform his bill to Senate Bill 163. In January, our Board of Elections voted to support amendments to Election Code Section 11-302B in Senate Bill 163, a bill introduced by Senator Cheryl Kagan, which would permit local boards to start processing mailed-in ballots 8 days before early voting and continuously thereafter, with two provisos. One, that in processing them, staff could begin scanning them into scanners without reporting them to the public. And two, that the bill contained clear definitions of what boards could permissibly do in processing mailed-in ballots. As you probably know, the Senate Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee favorably reported and amended Senate Bill 163, which contained these kinds of provisions, and the amended bill passed a third reading by the full Senate on February 15. On March 22, this committee will hold a hearing on Senate Bill 163. I hope that you will please report it favorably. I thank Delegate Moon for amending his bill to conform to Senate Bill 163. It's a very good idea. It's very important to allow local boards to start processing absentee ballots 8 days before early voting. As has been mentioned, absentee ballots have been very, very helpful to people, and they like them a great deal, especially during the pandemic. For these reasons and those set forth in my detailed statement, I urge the committee to report HB 329 favorably with amendments to conform to Senate Bill 163. Thank you for considering my testimony.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions. First, Delegate Wilkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my wonderful district mate and the Vice Chair Judiciary for bringing this very important bill. My questions, I think, are for our experts with the Board of Elections. Can you all just describe for us, I really want to unpack what we mean by pre-ballot processing. If you can, in detail, walk us through, you're getting the ballots in the mail, you're getting them from the drop boxes. Walk us through exactly what is taking place when we are pre-ballot processing.
Sure, I guess I'll answer that first, and then Katie, if you want to add anything to that. I mean, basically, this bill will start the canvas. I mean, that's what's going to occur with the pre-processing of it. The local boards will receive mail-in ballots. The initial review will be, of course, to see if there's a signature. If there's missing a signature on that, then they will contact that voter to help cure that ballot. If the signature is there, then it goes right into their normal canvassing process, which is then making sure that there's a team. The Board of Canvassers will be present. They will start opening up, separating the ballots, and then making sure that they go into the machine and get scanned by the end of each day. Additionally, if there was any delivery of the ballots through the online method, then they would be basically transposed onto a ballot paper that can be scanned so that they would then be processed that way. And that would also be a bipartisan team on that to make sure that that transposition of votes is in accordance with the voter's intent. So those are all the processes that are going to take place in this period. Ms. Berry, did you want to add anything to that? Oh, sorry, for the record, Jared Demarinis, Director of Candidacy and Campaign Finance for the Maryland State Board of Elections.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Demarinis and Delegate Wilkins for the question. For the record, Catherine Berry, representing the Maryland Association of Election Officials. So this bill would essentially help us to begin the process of reviewing the envelopes that are returned with the ballots, of course, and then to begin the process of using our bipartisan teams to separate the ballots from the envelopes and then to be able to scan the ballots. At present, we have over 200,000 mail-in ballot requests, which is more than we have seen in any previous election. And so the interest of Mayo is trying to, of course, meet the certification deadline after the election, but also give the candidates a clearer picture of what the election results are going to be. So on election night, we would be able to release the early voting results, election day results, and the canvass results. So I did provide a lengthy written testimony in support of this bill, and I would entertain any questions you might have after this bill hearing, but we do support this bill, and thank you to Delegate Moon for amending the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you don't mind, I just want to unpack this a little further. Okay, so Catherine, since you are on the ground really managing this, the way that I'm understanding for us in terms of pre-ballot processing, we're checking to make sure that the envelope has the signature. We're separating the ballot from the envelope, and we're putting them through the machines. Is a vote being tallied up at that point, or are we just sort of preparing, getting the ballots ready?
Sure, that's a great question. In 2020's election, we followed the State Board of Elections procedures that were laid out, which included, of course, when you scan the ballot, that is tabulating the ballot. And then after each day of canvass, we were able to pull the results and secure them to be tallied or to be fully tabulated and at a later time. And so the State Board of Elections procedures required us to, pull the sticks to keep us organized during the audit process and so that we could keep track of where all the ballots were in the process and to be able to audit after the election. So that is what this bill would codify, is how it was handled in 2020.
So they are being counted but not released.
Correct.
Okay. And my other question, and this is for anyone at State Board of Elections or Catherine, regarding, because it sounds like the bill stops at early voting, if a jurisdiction wanted to continue pre-ballot processing during early voting, because there's so many ballots and they want to continue doing that, is this bill saying that they would be prohibited? They would have to stop at early voting? And how in the past, how many ballots have come in, or percentage of ballots have come in after early voting? Are we missing sort of a huge chunk that need to be pre-processed by doing that?
Sure, thank you for the question. I can share with you in my written testimony, I did a comparison of most of the counties. So the majority of the ballots in 2020 that were returned came in before early voting. So the universe of ballots that came in after early voting was somewhat smaller. And as far as canvass during early voting, we don't particularly encourage that to happen because we are trying to manage system or processes independently of one another, and also to keep in mind for the candidates to have, you know, election years at early voting, and then also trying to manage people at the election boards to watch the canvass. So we were recommending that we don't canvass during the early voting period. I know that was a point of question in the last legislative session. So, you know, we definitely would be open to having that allowed, but I'm not sure that many local boards would do it during the early voting period. Does that answer all of your question?
Yes, thank you.
Questions? Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question has to do with the limit on 8 days before early voting. And since a local board may be receiving mail-in ballots before then.
Yes.
But they can't accept or reject a ballot, but they can verify this, check if it is signed, and if it's not signed, begin the curing process. They don't have to wait for that 8-day window to start the curing process, correct?
I guess, Delegate, right. There's a difference between what the 8-day window actually means. That's opening, that's beginning the canvas. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the canvas part here. It's basically starting the process for it. It's opening up the ballots and putting them through the machine. There's a difference between looking at a ballot that's coming in and helping cure it sooner, and then seeing if there's a missing signature. So there are two separate processes here that need to be distinguished here.
So to clarify, if I may, Delegate Feldmark, for receiving the ballots, that is essentially giving the voters credit for voting. The voter would get a notification that we have received their ballot at the local board, and we can start that curing process if need be. That is done administratively. The canvas process is done during an open session, essentially. So there's observers and that type of thing. And that's when we start to separate the ballots from the envelopes. But the canvassing teams are looking, of course, at the signature area to make sure that one was not missed during the administrative portion. It's a double check, essentially.
So my question really is, if you look at page 2 of the bill in line 5, right? A local board may not accept, reject, open, or process. So I'm wondering where accept and reject fit in checking if the oath is signed and the curing process. Are those different steps? I'm not sure what accept and reject mean in this context.
Sure. So thank you for the question. Accepting and rejecting is done during the open session period, where, you know, our bipartisan teams are reviewing each of the ballots, and if there are no issues, the ballot gets accepted. If the ballot has issues, it goes to the board members for a board decision, and it may or may not, you know, be accepted or rejected following COMAR and the law. So that's all done during open session. All that we're doing when you see receive, all we are doing is basically putting it in the voter registration database that we've gotten a ballot for that voter, and that voter's been notified that we have received it. Everything else is done as part of the canvas.
Okay, so accepting or rejecting, you're talking about the ballot itself, not the envelope.
Well, right.
Okay. Because I guess I read these as sort of in chronological order, but you're talking about once the envelope is opened. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
Delegate Jones.
I apologize. Can you hear me? I couldn't get my mute off. I apologize. Thank you, Chairwoman. I'm sorry, and I don't think anyone's addressed this. How does the counting work? How do we keep the votes secret and maintain integrity? I'm not sure maybe who could answer that for me.
So I'll start, and Jared or Mary can fill in the gaps. So we all, as staff, board members, anyone that is involved with the canvas, have to sign an oath of security to say that we're not going to release any of the election results. And essentially, like in 2020, when we pull that stick out, it gets secured with the election director. It is not a volunteer. It is not an election judge that pulls that stick or anything like that. And so we secure that, and no one has access to it except those of us that work at the Board of Elections. And as I had in my written testimony, we are state employees, county employees, and we took an oath to do our jobs, and that's where it stands. And again, we are following the policy as written out by the State Board of Elections in 2020.
I guess I mean, the process is open to the public, and we make everyone sign non-disclosure agreements that they cannot release any of the results prior to Election Day before that.
Thank you.
Questions? Okay, seeing no further questions, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 329. Thank you, Vice Chair Moon. Now, Delegate Kerr is presenting for Frederick County delegation on House Bill 1175. Delegate Kerr, when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. I'm Delegate Ken Kerr. I'm here before you today presenting House Bill 1175, Frederick County Board of Education vacancies. I do so at the request of the Frederick County Executive and County Council. Vacancies on the Frederick County Board of Education are currently filled by an appointment-based process whereby the county executive appoints a replacement. The county council then confirms that appointment. This is also how the process happens in Howard and Prince George's counties. Frederick County has a 7-member, all-elected, all-at-large Board of Education. On presidential years, 3 members are elected, and during gubernatorial years, 4 members are elected. What the council requests is to take advantage of the fact that during the midterm of every elected member's term, there is an existing election, either presidential or gubernatorial, which can be used to fill a vacancy. If the vacancy occurs 30 days or more before the primary election filing deadline, the vacancies will be filled in that election. If the vacancy occurs after that 30-day period, it will be filled as it is now by the county executive. Under current state election law, during a nonpartisan primary, such as the one held for Board of Education, twice as many candidates as there are seats are nominated for the primary election. If a special election is needed to fill an unexpired term, 2 additional nominees will participate in that primary. For example, if it's a 4-seat year, the 5th highest vote getter will fill the remainder of the unexpired term in question. Special election for Board of Education vacancies employing this method occur in Howard, Talbot, and Wacomico counties. So to accomplish this, the state education article for Frederick County has to be amended. And I thank you for your time and attention and request a favorable committee report for this Frederick County delegation bill.
Thank you. Questions, Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only question I had, my friend, and I'm sorry if I missed it, did the delegation unanimously support this, or is there some split in the delegation? I know you said that the county council had and the executive had requested it. I just wanted to get a sense of where the other members of the delegation were.
Yeah, this was fully supported by the Frederick County delegation. This committee heard the bill. Okay.
Yep, sounds good to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Delegate Kerr.
Thank you.
That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1175. We are going to circle back to Delegate Cox. First calling Delegate Cox, House Bill 1348. Delegate Cox.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, and for your patience when I was not able to be present earlier. House Bill 1348, Election Law Manual Post-Election Tabulation Audit, Timing and Selection, is a inexpensive, random statewide manual audit system to be conducted immediately after each election. It's important that Maryland voters and candidates know right away whether their results are verified. In the United States, government is only governed by the consent of the people. That consent is based on the public's confidence that those in office are there because the majority voted for them. As we've seen nationally, the public's confidence in the honesty of our elections is at an all-time low. According to MIT's Election Data and Science Lab, conducted a poll in 2016 by Gallup, the response was how much confidence did they have in the honesty of the elections? Only 30% answered they were confident. In the last year, only about 26% of Republicans say that they were confident in the last election and also leading up to the 2022 election, whereas even Democrats, close to 30%, are nervous or question the integrity of the current systems and checks and balances. Confidence is low because of common sense things not being done. A manual audit of the election system is one of those common sense things. Even Canada now has moved to a hand-counted paper ballot system. Verified voting told the State Board of Elections, this is a research polls. Research shows well-conducted audits have the capacity to improve voter confidence in elections of crucial importance in today's political climate. And as we're hearing testimony today, mail-in ballots must be verified with the affidavit envelopes. In 2017, the administrator's report of the Board of Elections had testimony from Verified Voting Foundation. This is an organization of 60 highly regarded professionals who are computer scientists, electrical engineers, election law lawyers, inventors of secure online banking processes, members of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. They have PhDs from prestigious universities. They have received awards and honors in their field of study, which where they live and breathe secure and verified voting. And the testimony that was given to the State Board of Elections and documented in the administrator's report was as follows, quote, Maryland recently transitioned successfully to a voter-marked paper ballot scanner system, and we commend the state for providing voters with the means to check that their votes were captured as they intended on a physical record of their intent, i.e. the ballot. The greatest benefit is that those records of voter intent can be used to demonstrate accuracy of the outcome of elections in Maryland, giving election officials a tool to audit and approve correct functioning of the system and make ongoing improvements. The Maryland General Assembly clearly wants the new system to fulfill its full potential by being subject to a post-election tabulation audit. The process for Maryland's post-election audit must use the paper ballots to independently check the results of the voter system. If it relies only on images produced by the software in the system that it purports to check, it does not qualify as a valid audit. That was from the verified voting report to the State Board of Elections, but for over 6 years since, the state has not instituted a post-election audit using paper ballots. According to the verified voting expert, the use of independent software to tabulate digital images of the voted ballot does not constitute a legitimate post-election tabulation audit. Yet that is what is being done in Maryland today. The experts agree that this is the process that is common sense and should be done in Maryland. It's a bipartisan issue. There's no reason to not proceed with a post-election manual tabulation of the audits. And so I respectfully ask for a favorable report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any questions for Delegate Cox? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Delegate Cox. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1348. Now calling Delegate Cox, House Bill 1361, whenever you're ready. Is Delegate Cox still here? Okay, did he leave us?
I think he did.
Okay. Well, Delegate Saab.
He's coming back in.
Okay.
Am I up?
Let's go ahead with you, Delegate Saab. House Bill 1183, whenever you're ready, Delegate Saab.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Vice Chair, member of the committee, for the record, I am Delegate Sid Saab here testifying House Bill 1183. This bill is not new to this committee. Many of you remember it as the Preventive Measure Unit pilot program from 2020. But before I start, I wanted to bring your attention that due to a drafting error, the MGA website does not have, it has the original bill from 2020, but does not have the adopted amendment, which became the bill. So you should have all received an email with the amended version, which is the entire new bill. So I just want to make sure that there's no confusion with that, and I appreciate your understanding. So as you know, the COVID pandemic has exacerbated rising mental health needs among children and youth. School closure and shift to online learning has limited access to education and social opportunities, as well as mental health services. Children and youth are experiencing soaring rates of anxiety, depression, trauma, loneliness, and higher than ever suicide rates. Mental health challenge can affect success at school and in life. Yet few aged school children are able to get the help they need. And a lot of work has been done to this bill. So first, let me just point out one of the things, three major things that have been addressed in this bill. The title has been moved from the Preventive Measure Unit pilot program into, number one, Student Mental Health Support System. The original bill, or the original amendment of the bill, was narrow and it only addressed middle schoolers. This bill addresses school-aged children. It also replaced the term screeners in the bill with behavioral health coordinators. And finally, it removed Anne Arundel County Public Schools out of the bill and replaced them with the Anne Arundel County Mental Health Agency. This bill is fully consistent with the recommendation from the Anne Arundel County Mental Health Task Force, with a focus on providing mental and behavioral health support to school-aged children. So what this bill aims to do is by marrying some of the existing pieces of the Anne Arundel County Crisis Center and then expanding on some of the pieces that they aren't engaging in. So this bill does not, just want to point out that this bill does not target any child by their demographics, but it rather focuses on the families who are calling in from referrals from other agencies, such as the cricket team, which is Community Resource Initiative Care Team. It's getting calls from schools. It's getting calls from Department of Social Services, Department of Juvenile Services, and any other child serving agency. But even though the referral can come from multiple avenues, the intent of this bill is to attend to those kids that are calling in, that their families are calling in. And by keeping this program very broad, everyone will have access. And that is to one thing that we need to ensure that any family that wants services for their child should be able to get it. And the mental health agency should be able to help coordinate that they are getting the right service at the right time. So under this bill, the mental health agency will be able to incorporate this program into their larger crisis system. So other funding sources can help the pieces that this isn't going to fund. There's also a reporting requirement in this bill that is very clear and addresses some of the concerns that we've had in the past from the NAACP and some other agencies, and was specifically about the targeting of the demographics or targeting certain group of students. And the reporting system, the reporting mechanism in this bill, it also ensures that there are steps taken, that implicit bias did not factor in the selection, but that's also a moot point because we're not targeting students. They are actually calling in, or their families calling in. This is one way we can improve the mental and behavioral health outcome in Anne Arundel County. And you may see an opposition letter from the Anne Arundel County Public School, but since they've been removed from the bill, they are reconsidering their position. And I have worked with the executive director of the Mental Health Agency for Anne Arundel County and the clinical director, and we did a lot of work on this bill, and they played a huge role in drafting the bill, and they're fully supportive, and their agency is able to take this on. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, I ask you for a favorable report on House Bill 1183. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Saab? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Delegate Saab. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1183. House Bill 1361, calling Delegate Cox whenever you're ready, Delegate.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and apologies for the disconnect there. It's an honor committee to present House Bill 1361, property taxes exemption of dwellings of senior citizens. According to Consumer Affairs, about 50% of seniors rely on Social Security for the majority of their income. The true buying power of Social Security benefits has decreased 30% over the past 20 years. And in fact, in this past year, with the 9% approximate inflation rate, it's only getting worse. According to the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, property taxes are regressive, impacting low and middle income families the most heavily. The tax remains the same or grows while the income of that taxpayer drops significantly. Add to that the inflation, and we have a coming disaster for our Maryland seniors. This bill will address that issue very clearly and forthrightly. And although the fiscal note claims that it's a 56, or excuse me, a total of a $33 million impact over the next 5 years, I want the committee to remember something. We're sitting on a $6 billion surplus, according to our comptroller. So this is going to help the lower and middle income families immediately. Our seniors are in desperate need of assistance. Just last month, one of my constituents faced this circumstance of questioning whether or not they can pay their taxes or buy groceries. He's living in the home the parents built, is over 70, and still having to work to pay his bills. He had taken a reverse mortgage lump sum to fix his aging home and recently suffered an illness, making it impossible to continue his work. Bills from his illness and a lack of income resulted in the inability to pay property taxes for 2 consecutive years. And because of this, he was nearly put out of his home. It was the high property taxes which he couldn't pay. So he had to fight to keep the roof over his head with a threatened tax sale. This should not be, particularly for our seniors, and particularly at a time when they've come through some of the hardest economic difficulties of our recent past. Keeping seniors in our homes is good for them, good for our families, and for our communities. USA Today reports that each foreclosure depresses the home values within 600 feet of that home by 1%. And as foreclosures mount, that figure compounds. 5 foreclosures in a city block means 5% loss for their neighbors. That's a minimum 5% loss, not including the inflationary loss that everyone's experiencing right now. Maryland must protect its most vulnerable population from forced homelessness. I respectfully ask for a favorable report for exemption for dwellings of seniors for property taxes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Cox? Delegate Barnes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Delegate Cox, I don't have my notes in front of me. Unfortunately, my staff isn't in. But what's the fiscal note on this?
Thank you, Delegate. The fiscal note has an immediate effect of $5.1 million. So that's very small in terms of the special fund revenue decrease compared to the $6 billion that's available. But over the next 5 years, it's a $33 million. It goes up by certain amounts that's stated there. And I think when you look at the exemptions, though, and this is not going to impact the most wealthy. This is a cap 64 years old and $40,000 income. So we're talking about Social Security folks that need immediate relief.
Do we have an idea how many seniors we're looking at? this happening here in the state of Maryland?
Well, that's a great question, Delegate, and I know that number, I recently saw that number is increasing exponentially, and in fact, it's intended to continue that way for home ownership, obviously, but I don't have the exact numbers.
And what's the age range for the senior population in which you're trying to help?
Be 64 years old and up. So we're talking about people who have put in a lifetime of work and are now on fixed income, and yet they're seeing inflation and property valuation taxation increases basically price them out of Maryland. And we need to make sure that doesn't happen. And unfortunately, it's not happening for the most for the higher income properties. We're talking about lower and middle income properties that are directly impacted the most.
All right, so last question, Madam Chair. So if we looked at the age of maybe 70 and older, that would bring the fiscal note down, but still get to the crux of what you're trying to do. Are you open for us trying to work on something to help you out?
Yes, sir, Delegate. I'm absolutely supportive of that. I know that the intent is to help those who most need it most. And so if that would be of the best assistance, I'm all for it.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Questions for Delegate Cox? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 1361. Thank you, Delegate Cox. Calling House Bill 1190, Delegate Fisher. Welcome, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and the esteemed members of the House Ways and Means Committee. Record, my name is Delegate Mark Fisher, and before you is House Bill 1190, titled Calvert County Civic Education Standards and Curriculum, otherwise known as the Social Studies Literacy Act. The bill only applies to Calvert County. Beginning in the 2024-2025 school year, the United States government course taught in high schools in the county shall include a unit, just a unit, on comparative political ideologies that discusses ideologies that conflict with the principles of freedom and democracy that are essential to the founding principles of the United States, including communism and totalitarianism. To assist families, civic institutions, local communities, and public schools, including charter schools in Calvert County, prepare students to be civically responsible and knowledgeable adults, the state board shall adopt age-appropriate civic education standards that must be incorporated into social studies curriculum at every grade level. Approve the curriculum to implement civic education standards established by the county board in accordance with this section. And this is an important part. Curate oral history resources to be used with the civic education curriculum that provide portraits in patriotism based on the personal stories of diverse individuals who have demonstrated civic-minded qualities, including first-person accounts of victims of the governing ideologies of other nations, who can compare those ideologies with that of the United States. The county board shall establish this curriculum. The civic education curriculum shall assist students in developing an understanding of shared rights and responsibilities of residents of the state, an understanding of the fundamental principles of the United States, a sense of civic pride and desire to regularly participate as citizens with government at the local, state, and federal levels, an understanding of the process for effectively advocating before governmental bodies and officials, an understanding of the civic-minded expectations of an upright and desirable citizenry that recognizes and accepts responsibility for preserving and defending the blessings of liberty inherited from prior generations and secured by the United States Constitution. The county board shall submit the civic education curriculum to the state board for their approval. Effectively, that is the bill. And at the heart of the bill, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee, a bill that applies only to Calvert County, which is a unit of portraits and patriotism, is the idea that when we have people coming to this country who have come to this country They've come to this country for a reason. What is that reason? They've come here because our country offers something that they could not find in their home country. Opportunity, economic opportunity, freedom, the ability to pursue your dreams. And I would suspect strongly that all of us know people that are just like that have come to this country and have tried to make a better life for themselves and their families. And if we had these individuals who would be discussing portraits and patriotism at our public schools in Calvert County, curating oral histories, talking about their own personal experiences of why they came here from totalitarian and communist and authoritarian governments from their home countries, then I think that it would develop a greater appreciation for the freedoms that we often take for granted in this country. I know all of us, as I said before, have personal stories to this effect. My story is my mother-in-law came from, she lived in Switzerland during World War II. And during World War II, my father-in-law ended up studying medicine in Switzerland right after the war because he served in the war. He met her in Switzerland. The reason he met her is because he couldn't get into medical school in the United States because there was a quota on Jews allowed into medical school. So he met her, they married while they were there, and of course had much in common because she hid in Switzerland during the entire war because she herself was Jewish. And that is in fact where my wife was born, who was a naturalized citizen. Having one of these individuals come to a class, this is just one story of thousands and thousands, would be a fabulous thing, these oral histories, and I think would grow our appreciation and more importantly, grow our children's appreciation of where they live and why where they live is so exceptional. I did want to speak to one last thing, and that is the Maryland State Department of Education, I think, wrote a letter saying, no, we don't allow this because we like top-down education. Obviously, folks, look, I'm not a fan of top-down education, okay? Never have been. And in the second to the last paragraph, MSDE writes, MSDE does not believe that the state should develop and approve resources that are singular and unique for one school system. Obviously, folks, this is a philosophical difference with me and as well as with the folks in Calvert County. We disagree. We disagree. We believe that there are a lot of educational standards that can be taught, and this is simply a unit. We're not replacing anything, we're adding a unit. So with that, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee, I submit this testimony to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And there are questions. Delegate Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Delegate Fisher, for this legislation. I have one question as it relates to the formation of House Bill 1190. Is this sponsored only by you and Delegate Clark, or is this a delegation bill?
Sure, it's sponsored by myself and by Delegate Clark. That is correct.
All right.
And the majority of the delegation supports the bill. And so, yeah.
When you say the majority, is it that you all took a vote on this?
We did. We did.
Okay. All right. So I think that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Patterson.
Delegate Jones.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And thank you, Delegate Fisher, for bringing this bill. You just shared so much of your family's story. That was very giving. Thank you so much for that. Now, is this bill really like a speaking tour to the schools?
So, sure.
And who would be organizing this speaking tour and like really lining up all these speakers?
Good question. It's clearly the administration in Calvert County, what they call central office, in combination with the civics teachers, all the teachers that teach U.S. history or history in general, they would be responsible for that.
So your local board of education would be in charge of putting together a unit of speakers to come to all the schools, or each administration in each high school would be doing this?
So it says here,
Yeah, I'm so
government
sorry. What does
course
the bill do?
taught in high schools in the county shall include a unit of comparative political ideologies. So it's high schools. And the county board shall submit the civic education curriculum to the state board for approval before implementing the curriculum.
And you had mentioned, I'm sorry, may I just have one more, Madam
First
Speaker?
delegate.
And you had said that civic pride or pride would be taught. Could you kind of drill down on that?
Sure. So this is actually from the bill itself, which is no better place to get it as opposed to from the fiscal note. I was like going directly to the bill. An understanding of the civic-minded expectations of an upright and desirable citizenry that recognizes and accepts responsibility for preserving and defending the blessings of liberty inherited from prior generations and secured by the United States Constitution. And one of the reasons why that's in there is because it's connected to the very beginning, which is to discuss ideologies that conflict with the principles of freedom and democracy, essential to the founding principles of the United States, including, among others, communism and totalitarianism. In other words, developing critical thinking skills about what makes our system different, what makes their systems different, and curating oral histories to discuss the same.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Delegate Jones.
Are there any other questions? I have a question, Delegate Fisher. I'm looking online. I'm not as familiar with, I know you have a Southern Maryland delegation, and then there's individuals. Are you the only member of the Calvert County delegation?
No, it's a good question. So it's Delegate Fisher, Delegate Clark, and Delegate Jones. And of course, we also have the Calvert County Commissioners as well. You should have a letter from the commissioners in your somewhere.
Tell them to update this website. It just has you listed.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is the three of us, indeed.
Okay, and they all support this bill.
So Delegate Jones did not take a position for or against. Delegate Clark and I took a position for. And then, to be fair, in the county government, the county commissioners, Commissioner Gadway took a position for this particular piece of legislation. The other four county commissioners did not take a position against. In other words, they did not take a position.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1190.
Thank you.
Next, House Bill 1235, Delegate Hill, and there's one witness who will follow Delegate Hill for 2 minutes. Delegate Hill, when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of Ways and Means Committee. My name is Terry Hill, and I'm come before you with House Bill 1235, which would establish the Youth Sports Advisory Commission. And I want to say at the outset that I have offered an amendment that would specify that the commission is really designed to address youth sports for children ages 5 through 13, 5 through 14. And that was always the intention of the bill, and I apologize for having missed the drafting error. So this commission would be set up to stay current on and review evolving science and evidence-based data regarding recreation and sports activities, their short and long-term impact on youth athletes, and make timely recommendations regarding policies and practices that maximize health benefits for our youngest youth athletes. We do have the Maryland Public Secondary School Athletics Association, which has a medical advisory committee, but the charge of that committee is really to address safety and health measures with respect to high school interscholastic activities. And you all know, many of you are parents, and I'm certain you know that, young children and teenagers are not the same. And certainly from a biological, physiological, and medical standpoint, children are not simply small adults. They are growing, they are going through different aspects, and all of those things have a lot to do with how activities affect them, not just in the short term, but the long term. And the reason that I've introduced this bill and similar measures in past years is I had particular concerns some years ago and came before this committee about injuries, particularly to the brain, to the joints from repetitive trauma, from concussions and other things, and what kind of long-term effects we would see. We see it in professional sports, and this is an evolving area. There was a lot of concern that there just wasn't enough known for us to make any kind of moves and change anything with respect to youth sports. And there was a lot of concern that, as the opposition said, I seem to be well-intended, but they really had an issue with the idea of a legislator being able to sort of come before the legislature and through a process somehow impose on them, who are really sports and youth sports experts, anything that would have to do with the safety of the kids, because, you know, rightly so, they feel like their priority is the safety of the kids. And I wouldn't argue with that. But what I would say is that by putting this commission into place, we're really minimizing the number of bills that would come forward simply because we as legislators feel an obligation to protect our kids. This would allow us to actually have a group of people who are not legislators kind of take a look at the science in an evolving way and see, are we doing everything that we can to make sure that our kids are protected from heat exhaustion and heat illnesses, from head traumas and potential resulting chronic traumatic encephalopathy, from repetitive sports injuries. I mean, after all, there's a reason that we don't let, you know, baseball players continue to pitch and pitch and pitch and pitch inning after inning after inning. We rest those joints. So if it's important for a 30 or a 24-year-old pitcher to rest their joints, why would we think it's not important for a 7-year-old pitcher or a 10-year-old pitcher or a 12-year-old pitcher to rest their joints as well? So I'm not the expert, and I readily own that, but there are people out there who have expertise, and I just don't believe that it is appropriate for us to continue only responding when somebody dies or has a major injury, when we could actually be a little bit more prospective and see if there is anything else we do. It may well be that this group would get together and they would meet and they'd say, you know what, Maryland's doing everything that we can, and that would be something wonderful. But it may not be that way. But the idea that we don't look because we don't want to know, because we just feel like we're doing everything we can, I think does not do service to our youngest constituents. And that's why this bill is here. And I really hope for a favorable report. I would say there's a second amendment. The turf fields folks asked that if this commission moves forward, that they would like to be there as well. All right, and I'll leave it with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicole Sherry for 2 minutes, please.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Nicole Sherry, President of the Mid-Atlantic Sports Turf Managers Association. I speak on behalf of the association to support with amendment House Bill 1235. Thank you to Delegate Hill for sponsoring the legislation and allowing our association to be amended and included within the commission. The Mid-Atlantic Sports Turf Managers Association, comprised of 250 members, takes youth safety seriously. Our association of professionals combines scientific agronomic principles with technical expertise to develop and maintain safe and aesthetically pleasing playing surfaces for all levels of play. Being a head groundskeeper at the professional level, I know firsthand how safe playing fields impacts athletes. Our association can provide recommendations to ensure all youth athletic fields are maintained with the athlete's safety in mind. We have submitted our written testimony. However, if the committee has any questions, I am happy to answer them at this time. Otherwise, the Mid-Atlantic Sports Turf Managers Association strongly encourages the committee to support House Bill 1235. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this bill? Delegate Guyton?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
I'd like my video to be on. Is there a way to have my video?
Control that, so I'm not sure.
Okay, sorry, Delegate.
Okay. Delegate Guyton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate this bill, Delegate Hill, Delegate Dr. Hill, and I think the doctor is an important part of this conversation, which is why I mention it. Because we're not just legislators trying to protect the health of children. You're a physician trying to help protect the health of children. I have a question for you though, because I remember when this bill came before us a couple of years ago in a row, that at that time, the Football Association also was in opposition to the bill, but many of them were in my district, and I helped negotiate a conversation where they seemed to be on board at the end of those conversations with amendments. Can you tell me whether this bill does not include those compromises, or whether they've just changed their mind at this point? Because I'm a little confused at their opposition to this bill today.
Sure, thank you. I think that what you're recalling, there were several bills. There were about 3 youth sports related bills that I brought in various forms. And some of them, the one 2 years ago was after meeting with the coaches and a number of other youth sports experts over the summer. I think that the last time we presented this bill, they were still in opposition. And the primary reason that they stated was they thought of this as a backdoor way of legislating what I had tried to do earlier. In other words, they thought that if this commission got together, that it would result in football being changed. They thought irreparably that somehow that this commission would make recommendations, perhaps that kids under the age of 11 shouldn't play tackle football, right? Or that gymnasts at age 7, 8, 9 shouldn't be tossed up in the air, or that there should be no body checks in hockey, the kinds of things that I had put in legislation. So they're at least from the testimony, and I did look back on it, their main opposition, they came out in support of one of the other bills. And that had to do with what I submitted to or presented to this committee a few weeks ago about the standardized safety and background checks and training. They supported that bill because they did feel that, throughout the state, all of our children should have the same protections in terms of the training that the people who are working with them have on basic health issues and first aid. But they did not support this because and I think that's even in some of the written testimony today, that they believe that this may end up with legislation that they
Thank you so much. I appreciate you clarifying that for me, because they were getting confused in my head. So this bill only puts together a commission to make recommendations.
Right. If I may say, which the legislature could always reject.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1235. Delegate Hill, House Bill 1233. And after Delegate Hill, there are 5 individuals signed up who will have 2 minutes each. Delegate Hill.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just need to shift for a second. Okay. House Bill 1233. 2 more seconds. I want to actually pull one thing up for myself. This is what I call the buck stops here vision bill. And again, I have come before this committee on a number of occasions and spoken to you about the reality that many of our children are in school not adequately equipped for the job at hand. Specifically, I'm talking about kids who fail vision screening tests, or kids who pass vision screening tests but never go on for various and sundry reasons to have eye exams, and are found later to have an eye problem that could have been cheaply and easily addressed if they had had an eye exam and gotten a pair of glasses. And the argument I've made before this committee in the past is that we ask often, and we spend a lot of money trying to address the problem of Johnny or Jan not being able to read. Why can't Johnny read? Well, if Johnny can't see, Johnny certainly can't read. And if Johnny needs glasses and never gets them, Johnny can't. And my concern is that we are investing through the blueprint and other things so much in terms of, trying to make sure our kids are successful academically and out in the world. And we're not doing sometimes the simplest upstream things, like making sure that they see. And most of you, I think, wear glasses. You know that until someone told you, you had no idea that what you were seeing without your glasses was not the way everybody was seeing. And there's plenty of evidence of kids who aren't able to read, can't see, they have problems, they struggle in school. And they get 2, 3, 4 years in, and the next thing you know, they're kind of the kid that's considered stupid. And that's a horrible word to say. And nobody wants to be bullied or harassed and called that. But our kids are called that. And sometimes when you're that kid, you end up being the class clown. Delegate Eversole set aside there. He got his glasses early. And sometimes that can actually lead to, dropping out. And sometimes it can actually lead to, frankly, not functioning in society in the best way possible, and even criminal activity. So these are not just speculative, there's evidence to support it. And what this bill does is it builds on a work group that I put together over the summer with a range of experts, and it sets up a couple of things. Let me quickly go through it. Basically, the first thing that this bill does is it adds an additional screening level to the screenings that our kids now undergo in school. And that costs. So there is an appropriation that we put into the bill, because we've heard year after year from local jurisdictions that they think that the goals of the bill are admirable and that's what we should do. But if we're not going to put money in it, they don't want to have any part of it. Number two, it continues to make sure that what we did a few years ago by passing the Atticus Act and making sure that parents get specific information about resources available to them to get adequate eye examinations, that information is given out, and that we become, now that we've been doing it for about 4 years, that we become uniform and looking at the best practices for how to share that information and what that information should say, and that we do that. The next thing that the bill does is it sets up what we're calling the Pediatric Vision Program. And that's a unique program in the sense that it would allow for pediatric eye physicians, so optometrists and ophthalmologists, to register with the system. And in return for that, when the parents get the information that says these are the local eye professionals in your area that you can go to if you need to have your child evaluated and followed, that they get on that list. And in return, they also are able to submit the pediatric eye exam results to a central depository, similar to how eye specialists now submit adult eye exams to the MVA. So the MVA can look you up. You don't have to bring anymore your note from your doctor saying what your results were. So we want to set up a similar system so that the school nurses no longer have to call parents to say, hey, your kid, failed the eye screening. Did you ever take them to a doctor? What did the doctor say? And try and hunt that down, because frankly, they're not very successful at getting that information in a lot of cases. But they could look for the information. If it said that Terry, who failed the exam, never got to the doctor, and it's been, a month later, they can then turn me over to the people at the school who are looking at folks who have issues, and they can talk to my parents. They can go through any kinds of number of ways of trying to make sure that I get that exam. And if I need to have glasses and haven't gotten it, that I get that. But if that doesn't work, what I want to do is make sure that we have a Maryland for Vision program. And the Maryland for Vision program would build on what Vision to Learn and Vision for Baltimore is already doing. As it is written in the legislation, it would ask for someone from the Department of Education, someone from the Department of Health to oversee a statewide program where the Vision program would become the resource experts. And if a local jurisdiction in Howard County said, we've got, 200 kids who don't have glasses, what can we do? They might say, hey, reach out to Lions Club, they can get you some vouchers. If it were St. Mary's County, they might have something else. So that's what the bill says. But subsequent to that, I've sat down with Vision to Baltimore, Vision to Learn, and some of the eye experts, and what we really think of the amendment that we have before you. Actually, I'm sorry, I guess that's the way we build it, is that we would actually ask them to simply roll out the program that they're already successfully doing in Baltimore, that they piloted over 3 years and are doing, to roll it out statewide, 4 or 5 counties at a time, until in 5 years, we're able to give the support that's needed that local resources don't have to every kid who needs it. The program could still build the insurance, they could build Medicaid, and they could recapture any of that money. And I apologize, the actual amendment, because that is what we amended the bill to before we submitted it. The amendment would ask for 18 to 24 months for these experts to get together and do a needs assessment across the state and find out in each jurisdiction, how many kids are we talking about, and what would the model look like to best serve that community. And then to come back to this body and to say, this is how we want to roll it out. The appropriation that is in the bill is sufficient, it's not sufficient, or it's more than we need. And then in the fall of 2024, roll out the program. So that's essentially what the bill would do. And you have supporting testimony. We've sent some additional testimony around to you all individually that did not get in time. And I'm really hoping that this finally gives us, I know there's been support in the past and we just couldn't get over that fiscal note and figure it out, but I hope that this would actually finally allow us to do what we need to do and to say once and for all that we're not going to put this off and that we're going to make sure that the buck stops here and our kids who need glasses are going to get them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next for 2 minutes, Catherine Carter, please.
Just a sec. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me just pull it up. Atticus says hi. He's 17 and a half, by the way. That's as much as you're going to get from him. But you can ask questions. Okay, my name is Catherine Carter. I'm a vision and student behavior advocate, and I'm asking for a favorable report for HB 1233 to create a more cost-effective, targeted vision screening system for our students so they can see and learn. If you look at the chart that I gave you over the last 7 years, we never hit above 42% follow-up. And if you look at our current screening, with our special ed teams are using outdated limited vision screenings when identifying disabilities. An Ohio study found that nearly 70% of the children with an IEP were identified with treatable vision problems, yet passed the vision screening because their vision problems did not affect their distance eyesight. Atticus always passed the screening. Also, it's a cost to the county health departments because the school nurse cannot differentiate who's had an eye exam. My first grader had an eye exam in September. He still got screened because they're not differentiating. They're just sending them all down for a mass screening. He doesn't need a screening. If it's been done in the last year. It's a cost burden for the school nurses to call up twice, almost $2 million for a school nurse to follow up. Imagine if she could just look it up like the MBA does and like they do for immunizations. So how do we create a more targeted and efficient school screening system? We have parents pre-screening at registration. We give the Atticus Act information to the parents when they register their children. And then we also give them an eye exam form, just like they do for dental. So that way they can be screening their kids. That's free. Second, a pediatric vision program is where we want to allow parents to electronically follow up. And finally, pre-screen by identifying at-risk groups like Atticus, who had a speech disorder and was getting an IEP for that. He should have been referred for an eye exam. So I hope you guys look at my testimony. It's about time that we focus on public awareness campaigns, follow-up health infrastructure, and give eye exams and glasses to uninsured students who otherwise wouldn't have access. Thank you.
John Willems, please, for 2 minutes.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, John Willems representing the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, here today to testify in support of House Bill 1233. We have supported similar legislation in the past. We are supporting with amendments to identify concerns related to the scope of the mandate on local school systems, not opposing the expansion of the number of eye screenings, but raising the issues about the costs of implementing that additional annual screening cost borne either by the school system or county health departments or jointly. We do have concerns about the bill's provisions that are behavior-based in terms of triggering mandated vision screenings based on specific student behavior. The fiscal note indicates that while state resources are provided and they appear to be quite ample, there are still a significant costs to be borne by local school systems in expanding the scope of these mandated eye exams. But to be clear, we do support and have supported in the past the creation of the statewide Vision to Learn program and better statewide coordination of connecting students and families with optometrists and ophthalmologists and high quality vision services. As a little guy who was a really good reader, but because I held the book 1 inch away from my face, I was, as a second grader, sent down to read to the first graders and had a panic attack because I couldn't see the book if I held it far enough away from me to hold it at my side and read through it with the first graders, because I couldn't see that far, and I still can't see that far. So it wasn't until I couldn't read the big E on the eye chart at the end of third grade that I actually got glasses. So I relate, and it's important. And certainly in terms of equity, as the testimony points out, we want to be sure that we're connecting all families with these important vision resources. Thank you.
Brianna January for 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Committee. Happy to be here today. Brianna January with the Maryland Association of Counties in support of HB 1233 with amendments. This committee has been particularly interested in the issue of student vision, and counties have been engaged on various iterations of this bill for a long time. And we thank the bill sponsor for including us as collaborative partners over the interim. If it is the intention of this committee to develop policy this session to start addressing this issue, counties just ask that you please do not leave our local jurisdictions stuck with a huge fiscal mandate to do so, as the bill's fiscal note suggests might be the case, especially if there are state funds available that could be used to support student vision. So committee, we'd be happy to continue to work together on the issue, whether via a pilot program or clarification on how state funds can be leveraged to move the needle on this particular issue. And with that, counties urge a favorable report with amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Davion Percy for 2 minutes. I did not see him in here, but he is signed up. Davion Percy. Okay, Karen Siska Creel, please, for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Karen Siska Creel, and I'm the Director of School Health Services in Anne Arundel County. Today, I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Association of County Health Officers, MACHO, in opposition to House Bill 1233 due to the following concerns. This bill would require expanding vision screening to all third and fourth graders, students with IEPs, 504s, students with reported medical conditions or behavioral problems, students with lower academic performance, all students who miss more than 2 weeks of school due to an illness. This increases the provision of services by local health departments and boards of education by 50% without any funding mechanism. It would require local health departments and boards of education to ensure diagnostic vision evaluation for students who fail their screening and whose parents or guardians do not arrange for follow-up evaluation. In addition, it would require local health departments or boards of education to provide corrective glasses for students free of charge or bill those who have insurance. To ensure the requirements of this diagnostic care and the supply of corrective glasses are carried out, mobile vision clinic vans would need to be purchased, equipped, and staffed to provide these services. Otherwise, local health departments and boards of education would be required to arrange and pay for transportation of students to private optometry offices during school hours. These financial burdens are well beyond the means of public agencies to absorb without a guaranteed sustainable funding source. Finally, if students are with specifically identified medical learning problems are to be evaluated for vision problems, a basic vision screening as proposed in this bill is insufficient to identify potential problems affecting their education. A comprehensive examination by a clinician licensed to treat eye disorders is medically indicated. MACHO acknowledges that expanded student vision service is a laudable goal. However, without reliable, sustainable funding, local health departments and boards of education cannot carry out this bill requirements. For these reasons, MACHO opposes House Bill 1233. Thank you.
Any questions for Delegate Hill or any of the witnesses? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1233. House Bill, our last bill of the day, House Bill 1231, Delegate Ebersol, and there are 20 witnesses after Delegate Ebersol who will have 2 minutes each. Delegate Ebersol, when you're ready.
Yeah, score of witnesses to come. So I'll go quickly. One of the things that I'm proudest of that we've done in the legislature is establish, with a great deal of work and a great deal of good intent that I think will play out, is the blueprint for Maryland's future. One of the big features of that, among many, is that it establishes career ladders for teachers and educators. It establishes salaries that are good compensation. And to that end, it will tend to attract and keep the best educators here in the state of Maryland. The blueprint was largely silent on some other issues, and one in particular was mental health professionals in the building. And many of us have had discussions surrounding how to help students who are having difficulty. There's a great deal of discussion one way and the other about whether SROs should be there to protect us against problems in the building. But one of the things that we constantly say is that a police officer, if indeed we do keep them in the building, would be someone who often helps on the back end of a problem rather than the front end. It's these mental health professionals that help on the front end. And so they're very important to have in the building. And we need to attract and keep the very best in our schools. And so this bill is largely used as a template, the blueprint, and its effort to have teachers be attracted and keep them here. And so you'll find many of the elements in this deals with a handful of health professionals that are in the building that I think if we keep them and get the very best, they will help our students identify problems before they manifest themselves and help us to have more healthy students and more healthy schools. And with that, I will turn it over to whomever the chair thinks is next.
Okay, next, Gail Martin for 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry, I had some trouble unmuting myself. My name is Gail Martin. I'm here representing the NASW Maryland chapter, specifically the Social Work and Schools Committee of that chapter, for which I am the chair. And thank you for this opportunity. And thank you, Delegate Ebersole, for bringing this bill and for giving such a great summary. I'd like to turn your attention to a report that was released last month by the Hopeful Futures campaign. It's America's School Mental Health Report Card. It's the first time we've had something like this nationally. And in the coalition that did this research and released this, identified 8 parameters on which they evaluated every school in the country. And they gave on these 8 parameters scores of 0 to 3. I don't think you'd find any of the parameters surprising because you've been paying attention to them in your passage of the Safe Schools legislation a number of years ago and the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. So out of a possible perfect score of 24, Maryland scored 12. And I think that's a little embarrassing for our schools, given that we're one of the wealthiest states in the country. One of the parameters in that, one of those 8 parameters, looked at the ratios for school psychologists, school counselors, and school social workers in schools that are recommended as ideal, as opposed to what is currently, in fact, happening within that state's schools. And on that particular parameter, Maryland scored a 0. Now, these parameters are part of the blueprint, and one of the provisions in that legislation is for local school systems to report how they're getting closer to reaching that goal. So it's clearly a goal that has been set out. But if we aren't hiring and keeping these individuals, we can't get there. In order to attract the best and the brightest among school mental health providers, we need competitive starting salaries, clearly, but that's not within the purview of this particular body. I can tell you that there is.
Ms. Martin, can you wrap up your testimony, please?
Yes, I can. So I encourage you, please, to consider passage of this bill by beginning it with a favorable report. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Amy Hicks for 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and representatives of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm here, my name is Amy Hicks, and I'm here before you today representing my profession of physical therapy and other health professionals working in the Maryland school systems. I'm in favor of Maryland House Bill 1231, Maryland Blueprint Retention of Teachers and Other Professionals. I've had the pleasure of practicing as a licensed physical therapist for the past 37 years, and the last 15 of them in Anne Arundel County Public Schools. We use the OTs and PTs, related service professionals, are trained practitioners who do not fit into the typical educational professional career ladder. PTs are required by the Maryland Licensing Board to complete 30 continuing education credits every 2 years for the life of our license. We are also required to attend school-based professional development programs through our work sites. Though our licenses are a valued commodity for the county and the state to collect third-party billing and support students and teams, we struggle for representation. I am asking this committee to consider advanced credentials available to PTs and PTAs that are in line with the advanced certifications that teachers have available. Currently, the physical therapy degree in Maryland is a doctorate degree for entry-level physical therapists as compared to educators.
Hey, Tony.
Hey, Doug, you got a minute?
I do. I mean, they're actually testifying my bill.
Delegate
because
thank you. Go ahead.
Compared to educators' entry-level degree, which is a bachelor's degree with teacher certifications. Based on entry-level credentials of these professions, the advanced credentials cannot be considered the same for each profession. Separate tracks with equal relevance should be explored. Is it important that our professional services as practitioners continue to be recognized? Our practice as clinicians is integrated with cultural competencies and school-based policies to align with educational trends. We very much support the study as outlined in Section 2 of the bill and offer the following additional issues to be considered. In determining levels and indicators of professional advancement in the school system, examine how to align credentials with experience in the school system. Examine what limitations and advanced credentialing opportunities may exist within the respective health professions and how they may impact advancement in higher levels. Examine how this incentive program aligns with existing compensation step programs in each county board of education, and examine and make recommendations regarding payment and incentive programs to ensure transparency and ease of applicability across all county boards of education. In support of career advancement and employee retention, it is important to create a career ladder that fits our role as clinicians in the Maryland schools. Exploring options for opportunities for career advancement of healthcare professionals in the educational setting will foster greater expertise, retention, and mentoring of professionals. I look forward to seeing the development of career advancement for healthcare professionals to make Maryland schools the model others will look to. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Sarah Quirk for 2 minutes, please. We can't hear you. No, and you're not muted.
Hold on. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect. Go
Okay,
ahead.
perfect. Good afternoon, Madam Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, respective members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Sarah Quirk, and I come before you today representing the profession of occupational therapy and other health professions working in the Maryland school system. I'm in favor of Maryland House Bill 1231, Maryland Blueprint Retention of Teachers and Other Professionals. I had the pleasure of practicing occupational therapy as a certified occupational therapy assistant for 24 years. I've worked in mental health, neurorehabilitation, private and public school systems. For the last 15 years, I've been a valued member of IEP teams for the severe and profound students in one of Baltimore County's public separate day schools. My expertise in treatment servicing students with multiple disabilities has aided students in transitioning to comprehensive education programs and helping families prepare for transitioning their students into the community upon graduation. My required licensure and certification to remain a practitioner has been overlooked by the Maryland education system. I'm a trained practitioner who does not fit the educational career ladder. However, my licenses are a valued commodity to the county and state to collect third-party billing funds. I am asking this committee to consider advanced credentials available to OTs and OTAs that are in line with the advanced certifications that teachers have available. With the growth of trauma-based learning becoming a staple in many schools, it's important that our professional services as practitioners is recognized. Our practice as clinicians is well seasoned with cultural competency initiatives that fit into our changing climate. It's important to create a career ladder that fits our roles as clinicians in Maryland schools. I look forward to the opportunity to work with a work group to assist in developing criteria tiers for career advancement to make Maryland schools a better product of its consumers. And I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next, Michelle Bartlett for 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and respective members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Dr. Michelle Bartlett, and I'm an occupational therapist working in the Howard County Public School System. I come before you today representing my profession of occupational therapy and other health-related service professionals working in the Maryland school systems. I am in favor of the Maryland House Bill 1231, Maryland Blueprint, Retention of Teachers and Other Professionals. I have been practicing occupational therapy for 30 years in a variety of settings. For the past 12 years, I've worked in the school setting with children birth to grade 8. During this time, I have obtained a post-professional doctorate as well as a certificate of autism specialist. Our educational requirements are extensive, and our contributions to educational disability diagnosis and treatment are unlike any other professional in the school system. In addition, federal and state regulatory requirements, as well as the expansion in the fields of physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech language pathology have drastically increased the roles and responsibilities of related service providers over the past 40 years. As registered Medicaid providers in the state of Maryland, occupational, physical, and speech language pathologists have generated a revenue of approximately $1.4 million annually for the Howard County Public School System. The increase in roles and responsibilities have not been reflected in the education ladder. It is important to create a career ladder that fits our roles as clinicians in Maryland schools. I look forward to an opportunity to collaborate with a work group to assist in developing criteria tiers for career advancement and make Maryland schools a better product for consumers and its stakeholders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Jennifer Lawing, please, for 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and respective members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Jennifer Lawing, and I come before you today representing my profession of physical therapy and other health professionals who work in the Maryland school system. I am here to testify in favor of Maryland House Bill 1231. I've been a licensed physical therapist for 30 years and have worked in outpatient orthopedics and in the public school system. During the past 11 years, I've had the privilege of supporting children, parents, and education teams as we work together to meet the educational needs of the children in Anne Arundel County. As a physical therapist, I am responsible for supporting children with a range of gross motor delays. Some of them are not walking yet at age 3, but within a few years' time, under the guidance of a school-based PT, they are independently walking. Others with more significant disabilities will be supported by a physical therapist until they transition to adult services. We are involved throughout this process in training staff, families, and to support mobility, positioning, and educational access throughout a child's time in our school system. In the state of Maryland, physical therapists who graduated years ago, like me, may hold an entry-level bachelor's or master's degree. Recent graduates hold a doctorate in physical therapy or a DPT. The current cost of attendance for a 3-year doctoral program ranges from $130,000 to $180,000. Unfortunately, these newly graduating physical therapists need years of mentoring to develop the breadth of knowledge and hands-on skills to effectively support our most fragile children. As healthcare professionals working in the school setting, we are often the ones who first notice medical concerns, such as increased seizure activities, signs of brain tumor, muscular dystrophy, or other neurological concerns. We instruct staff on the importance of monitoring vital signs while progressing a standing and walking program with the goal of promoting increased independence for our children. Our new graduates depend on the mentoring of experienced therapists to develop expertise and mastery as pediatric therapists. Many of us cover 5 to 14.
Ms. Line, can you please wrap up your testimony for us?
Yep.
Thank you.
So Many of us cover multiple schools, and as Ms. Hicks said, we have many hours of continuing education behind us. As you consider the bill before you, I ask you to realize the importance of physical therapists and other healthcare providers, and realize that it is vital that we be included with a career ladder and a retention program that recognizes our expertise. Thank you.
Bradley Petrie, please, for 2 minutes.
Hello, Chairperson Atterbury and the rest of the committee. Thank you for your time. My name is Brad Petrie. I'm the president of the Maryland School Psychologists Association, and I represent school psychologists across the state. And I do appreciate my fellow testimonial providers in talking about the benefits to the professionals that are supporting students in schools. But I really think that it's important for us to emphasize the benefits to students if we can recruit and retain more highly qualified practitioners. 75 to 80% of students who are in need of mental health supports and services don't get them. And of the students who do receive mental health supports and services, 80% of those students get those supports in schools. Nationally certified school psychologists, doctoral level school psychologists are trained with an emphasis in mental health service provision. And so they can help meet the needs of those students if we can retain and recruit and retain a high enough number of those professionals. And I think Gail Martin was alluding to the fact that we're in a mental health crisis right now. The National Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Adolescent and Child Psychiatry, and the Children's Hospital Association have indicated we're in a national emergency for mental health supports of students and young people. And so I think that the benefit to young people, if we can recruit and retain school psychologists and that are nationally certified and doctoral level, is very important and very beneficial to those students and their mental health needs. The pandemic exacerbated the problems. Disadvantaged students with disadvantages and acquiring mental health supports and services are at the greatest need. And so those provisions in this bill are highly important to student outcomes. And I speak for the Maryland School Psychology Association. And, again, I really admire the benefits that this bill may have towards my collegial professionals across the state. But really, I want to make sure that we are emphasizing the idea that by recruiting these professionals, we are supporting mental health outcomes for students. Thank you.
Luke Erickson, please, for 2 minutes.
He had to go to a meeting at the school he works at.
Okay. Kelly Anderson, please, for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Kelly Anderson, and I'm the coordinator of psychological services for Anne Arundel County Public Schools. I too am here today to highlight the importance of House Bill 1231. As Brad was saying, school psychologists are one of the providers identified in House Bill 1231, and we play a critical role in identifying and supporting students with social, emotional, and academic needs. School psychologists were essential prior to the pandemic, but we are even more essential now as we work to identify and support students with disabilities, mental health needs, and those who are experiencing academic struggles. It is currently hiring season for school psychologists. Many counties have openings, and we are in fierce competition with each other to scoop up available candidates. There are not enough candidates to go around, and when the season ends, some counties will have filled their positions and some counties will not. Unfilled positions don't just create overworked employees, they also result in reduced services for students. In order to solve this problem, Maryland needs to increase their competitiveness as a state. For school psychologists, two key forms of job quality are student to psychologist ratio and salary. Many of our surrounding areas, including Delaware, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C., have far better ratios, and we do not compete well in this area. Maryland could compete well in terms of salaries if House Bill 1231 is passed, because we would have a number of incentives to offer potential employees. House Bill 1231 is also an asset to all districts, reducing the stiff competition between counties because every district in the state would benefit. Supporting House Bill 1231 means that you are directly impacting the quality and quantity of highly skilled professionals that work with students. It is a concrete action that demonstrates your support of students' mental health, academic needs, and those with disabilities. And on behalf of all the coordinators in this state, I strongly urge you to show your support by supporting and passing House Bill 1231. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Phipps, please, for 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you, Chair Atterbury. My name is Katie Phipps. I'm a school psychologist working in Harford County Public Schools in a designated low-performing school. I serve 1,200 students in grades 6 through 8. The recommended ratio for the National Association of School Psychologists is 1 to 500 students. In 2019, House Bill 844 required local school systems to identify the number of school psychologists in order to calculate accurate ratios. The reports from that bill indicated that no county in Maryland met the recommended ratio. In fact, counties in rural areas reported over a 1 to 2,000 ratio, which I don't know how you serve that many students as one person. So there's a shortage of school psychologists now, and it's only increasing. In the beginning of the year, we did a needs assessment, and 32% of my students reported challenges with managing their emotions. It's hundreds and hundreds of students. By the middle of the year, it increased to 60%. It's too much for teachers to manage on their own. And our teachers are there for education, not to act as mental health providers. That's why we're there. So personally, I am pretty much at the breaking point of what I can handle. I have students in and out of my office all day needing support that I don't have the ability to give them. The current commission recommended building a career ladder for school professionals, including school psychologists, in order to address significant shortages and recruit and retain high quality professionals. However, when the bill passed, school psychologists and other related service providers, like my colleagues here, were excluded from the career ladder provisions. So there's no current mechanism for recruitment and retention of any of us. We're not asking for anything more than what's already provided in the career ladder for teachers. And House Bill 1231 would be a remedy to the oversight and allow us to recruit and retain professionals who maintain high credentials, reduce these ratios, and address the school mental health crisis head on. So we need to address the shortage, and we need to address it now. Thank you.
Scott Tiffin for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Scott Tiffin, and I'm here on behalf of MSPA, NASW, and MOTA, the OT therapists. I just want to cover a couple points that kind of already been talked about a little bit, but one is that, the blueprint and this committee in particular did a lot of really important work to ensure that Maryland's education system is world-class. But it's going to be impossible to ensure that all of our students are able to access that world-class education unless we have student health providers, whether it's mental health or somatic health. Because unless we address the issues that our students have, especially as students with disabilities, those students are not going to be ready or able to learn in the classroom. And when you read the reports from the commission, throughout all of them, there's an emphasis on the importance of health, whether that's, again, physical or mental health. And in the 2019 report, the commission even went as far to say that some of their recommendations, quote, assume that schools will have enough providers to meet national recommended ratios. However, for at least all, if not close to all of the providers talked about in this bill, they're greatly understaffed, extremely overworked, and not at national ratios. And in preparing for this bill, I talked to a lot of providers, whether it's psychologists, social workers, PTs, OTs, OTAs, and uniformly, I heard that providers are extremely burnt out, considering leaving the school workforce to go work into private practice. And if we're not able to retain these folks and attract new folks, we are never going to be able to provide the services students need in order to be properly educated. The last thing I'll say is I know the counties have concerns about the cost, and MSEA has concerns about the exact strategy we used in the bill to achieve our goals. We are open to a variety of conversations on ways to improve this issue, whether that is using the consortium, some of the consortium funding or other funding streams. We are totally open to all those conversations. We asked for a favorable report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Next, Mary Beth DiMartino for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the members of the committee.
You just went on mute. There you
Part,
go.
I apologize. I accidentally hit my button. My name's Mary Beth DiMartino. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm the executive director of the Maryland chapter of the National Association of Social Workers. We are the largest national organization of the profession of social workers, representing over 120,000 social workers nationwide and 16,000 here in Maryland. Over 500 of those are employed in our public schools, assisting students and their families so that their children can learn, grow, and thrive. We really applaud the Maryland General Assembly for your innovative and visionary support for public schools and your goals of creating a world-class educational system for our Maryland students. Critical to these efforts is the creation of a high quality and diverse educational workforce. The blueprint for Maryland's future lays out a transformational plan for teachers and administrators to ensure that our students have the best of the best. House Bill 1231 assures that school social workers are included in that specialized plan to help sustain student learning. As others have alluded to here, the COVID pandemic has had a devastating impact on our students' mental health. It was already an issue prior to COVID, but that has just been exacerbated. Our children are dealing with more community violence. They're dealing with grief and loss, parental job loss, food insecurity, just an unpredictable impact on their environment. And those kind of things prevent student learning. And so students have undiagnosed mental illness and they have diagnosed mental illness. And I just would like to highlight the fact that school social workers are the only MSDE certified educational professionals who are fully licensed mental health professionals. And on Monday, February 21st, WJLA, they reported that Montgomery County schools had 50 vacancies for school social workers and were only able to fill 2 of those positions. We have a crisis in Maryland, an inability to fill social workers. There is a shortage nationwide, but in Maryland, we really have a huge crisis. The state of Maryland, for their state employees, they have 200 vacancies. And so we really do encourage you to have a favorable report on House Bill 1231. Thank you.
Carolyn Chanowski for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Dr. Carolyn Chanowski. I'm a physical therapist. I've worked here in Maryland for 35 years, including several years in the public school system. Did I say that I'm the Director of Government Relations for the American Physical Therapy Association of Maryland? Anyhow, I come to speak in support of House Bill 1231. As you have already heard, we do have a crisis of healthcare providers in our school system. And with the pandemic, this crisis has gotten even more acute. When we look at other settings where physical therapists can work, we see that the school system does not offer salary and incentives that encourages people to work for the school system. And once they're in the school system, there is no mechanism for retention for the absence of a career ladder. And I'm seeing that this bill would address both of those things. As you have heard from everyone who has spoken, there are a large number of stakeholders looking at this bill, and it is a very complex bill. The recommendation that I have, or that the American Physical Therapy Association of Maryland has, is that this bill go to summer study, because we want to look at the number of stakeholders, the complexity of the problem, and the way that this can be applied equitably across the state. Madam Chairman, I respectfully request a favorable report on 1231 with the amendment that it go to summer study and the American Physical Therapy Association wants a seat at that table, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Daniel Shattuck for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Daniel Shattuck. I'm here today on behalf of APTA Maryland. Thank you, Delegate Ebersol, for introducing this bill. As we've heard today, a lot of good discussion, a lot of strong support for the bill. We, again, echo that support. You've already heard reference to the amendments that we've suggested to be added to the study to take a more in-depth look at how we can craft this bill in a way that touches on everything that we've heard today, the career ladder, elements of the career ladder, how we can accommodate the varying professional credentials, both inside the school and outside the school, and looking at coming up with the best way to really apply this transparently and, as Carolyn Chinaski said, equitably across the state. So with that, thank you for your support. I'm happy to answer any questions, and we look forward to continuing to work on this very important issue.
Thank you. Next, Lorraine Stafford, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Lorraine Stafford, and I'm here in support of House Bill 1231 with the amendments that the APTA of Maryland has suggested. I'm a physical therapist, or PT, licensed in the state of Maryland since 1993, and I've spent the last 12 years practicing within the Maryland public schools and the early intervention programs. When I share with neighbors that I'm a school-based PT, I often hear they're school PTs. There's PTs working in schools. Most of them conjure images of typically developing students who sustain injuries and may need a short course of therapy to feel better and possibly return to the sports field. Most persons are also surprised to hear that this type of PT practice, while very important, is not typically that which is practiced in the schools. School-based PTs work with children and young adults from 0 to 21 years old who have diagnosed developmental delays and or disabilities that impact their ability to access, participate in, and or make progress in their education. School-based PT services are provided only when identified problem areas directly affect educational performance. School-based PTs work side by side with teachers, both inside and out of classrooms, to help remove barriers for our students with disabilities. If a student cannot sit at a classroom desk, maneuver themselves between classes in a timely manner, access a bathroom when needed, turn the pages of a textbook, join their classmates on a field trip, access their computer, walk up and down stairs, or get on and off of a school bus, they're not likely to be successful at school. The role of the school-based physical therapist is to work with this student and every individual in the school that interacts with them to make sure the student is included and has access to their education. This is the reason that I believe House Bill 1231 is so important, not only for school-based PTs, but also for the success of our students with disabilities. Because school PTs are so vital to the student success, and because Maryland schools are a very unique environment for which a PT can practice, retention and recruitment supports are needed to encourage school PTs to work in Maryland schools. In a typical PT work environment outside
Ms.
of
Stafford, can you wrap up, please?
Yep, there are several, typically for a PT outside of schools, there's PTs, multiple PTs at one site. PTs practicing within our schools are typically the only PT at that site, and they may cover 5 to as many as 12 schools or more. We need a very highly skilled workforce. We need something that will encourage PTs to work within the schools, collaborating with all the individuals that are there, trying to remove these barriers for our students. And we need to do that in order to have that highly skilled workforce that Maryland is saying is so important. I ask for your support of House Bill 1231. Thank you.
Mary Casper for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair and members of the House Ways and Means Committee. For the record, my name is Mary Casper, and I'm President-elect and Interim Public Policy Director of the Maryland Speech Language Hearing Association. I'm here to speak in favor of House Bill 1231, Student Health Professional Retention Program, and to suggest one amendment. It is critically important that school-based healthcare providers be fairly and equitably compensated for their work. The COVID-19 pandemic serves as a reminder to us of how essential healthcare workers are to our hospitals, public health agencies, our economy, and our schools. Fair compensation, similar to what this body created for teachers within the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, will allow for recruitment and retention of school-based speech language pathologists, audiologists, and other student healthcare professionals. Much like teachers, administrators, building engineers, and clerical staff, our schools cannot safely operate without student health professionals. School-based healthcare providers are not just for medical emergencies. Many provide services to students with learning disabilities and physical impairments. And without student health professionals on staff, many schools will not be able to provide services to students with IEPs or 504 plans. This legislation will allow those who desire to provide healthcare services in school-based settings to do so while being compensated fairly, which will reduce turnover and increase job satisfaction. As this committee continues to iron out the details of this bill, I ask that this body consider an amendment to recognize the advanced credential of speech language pathologists and audiologists to the text on page 2, section B. Our advanced credential is a certificate of clinical competence, which is issued by the American Speech Language Hearing Association. Our lobbyist, Davion Percy, or Percy Public Affairs, has been coordinating with stakeholders to get an amendment in the bill. Thank you, Delegate Ebersole, for sponsoring House Bill 1231. I urge this body to accept our requested amendment and to vote the bill out as favorable with the amendment report. Thank you.
Megan Miskowski for 2 minutes, please.
Hi, my name is Megan Miskowski, and I'm a Baltimore City resident, parent, educator, and speech language pathologist here today on behalf of the Baltimore Teachers Union to discuss House Bill 1231. Baltimore City alone has over 800 student health profession positions, including speech, occupational, and physical therapy, providing direct educational services to thousands of our most vulnerable learners. The Blueprint legislation created career ladders to recruit and retain the highest qualified educators using a mix of tools, including salary incentives. For 100 years, speech language pathologists have been part of public schools. Our services, just like those of special educators, are considered specialized instruction under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. They are recognized as being vital to the success of students with disabilities, including those with communication disorders. The current situation in Maryland is grim. Representatives from MSDE attended the recent MASHA conference. I was taken aback by their pitch, which was for retired SLPs across the state to return to the workforce. This is not a sustainable strategy for Maryland. Hundreds of students across the state are missing services because school systems are unable to fill empty positions. We know there will be many more vacancies on the horizon without enough SLPs to fill those roles. Maryland is in competition with other states facing the same shortages to recruit and retain high-quality student health professionals. Similar to the Blueprint, the passage of the bill would enable school systems throughout the state to fill vacancies and attract highly qualified candidates from around the nation to Maryland to ensure that our students receive the services and instruction they deserve. Our students with the greatest need must be our highest priority. Students with autism, a stutter, traumatic brain injury, or cerebral palsy should not have to wait months for a clinician in Maryland schools. I encourage the House Ways and Means Committee to support this bill with amendment. It mirrors the Blueprint and ensures the inclusion of student health professionals who serve students with disabilities. I agree with my colleagues from MASHA, of which I'm a member, that ASHA's clinical certificate of competence should be recognized as the advanced professional certificate for speech language pathologists and audiologists. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have 2 unfavorables. Brianna January for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Again, Committee Brianna January with the Maryland Association of Counties in respectful opposition to HB 1231. County's opposition here is much like that what you heard from me last week on a bill to provide a school nurse in each public school. We agree that Maryland students deserve access to appropriate health professionals in our public schools, and we are surely sympathetic to many of the points raised by proponents today. However, we do oppose the funding mandate set by HB 1231 after having just been held to the ambitious requirements of the blueprint, which included many short and long-term funding requirements for local governments. That landmark legislation embraced a whole system concept of successful schools and priority setting, and notably, committee, school staff pay and benefits were aspects of the blueprint that the legislature has already settled. As was the substantially enhanced local funding deemed necessary for public education. So committee, compelling additional local spending for education, having just approved significant funding requirements under the blueprint, would be unfair and unreasonable. And to be frank, it would be downright impossible for some of our local jurisdictions. And I'll also note that the fiscal note for the bill shares a lot of these concerns. So I'll point you to that. As such, MACO urges an unfavorable report from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, John Willems for 2 minutes, please.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, John Willems representing the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, testifying in opposition today to House Bill 1231. Look, the bill is interesting in that it mandates raises for certain categories of school employees. I'm not sure about the bill connecting those dots with any recruitment program to address the pipeline issues of concern related to these categories of school health professionals. I am fairly certain, however, that the bill is not aligned with the blueprint, in that while the blueprint requires that the career ladder be subject to collective bargaining, this bill requires that the program be subject to collective bargaining. And that may be an issue of semantics and something that could be addressed through amendments, but it's of concern related to any new significant complementary program being added, appended onto the blueprint that mandates raises, not in ways anticipated by the blueprint or the Kirwan Commission, and not in ways that are funded under any of the current formulas, including the state and local shares, which we're all eyeing very closely over the next couple of years. Again, as some members of this committee know, in the time I have available, as the son and brother of a school psychologist, I relate very interpersonally to the issues and concerns being raised by many of the people supporting this bill. But mandating significant raises for entire groups of educational professionals, I think, is a too simple solution to a problem that is much broader and more complex in terms of the recruitment, the education and placement of employees to address the ratios of concern that were described. And so we do not support this legislation, certainly not at this time, and request an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Ebersol or for anyone who testified here today? Okay, seeing no questions, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 1231. Thank you all for coming in to testify. That concludes the bill hearings for the Ways and Means Committee today. Members, if you could just hold on, please. I have a couple of announcements. We'll let folks